Hey everyone, Kuro the Artist here, and welcome back to another Ben 10 breakdown. Alien Force's strongest suit was planning ahead. They got the whole hybrid arc mapped out, and the payoff was exciting, memorable, and it still holds up. UA brought their extensive planning back with the Greg and Kevin plots, setting up moments in advance to pay them off later. Both Forge of Creation and Absolute Power had wild, captivating stories that took the trio in new directions, and it worked for a lot of people, but it always undermined itself at the last second, making the story unpalatable as a whole. The best part of these episodes is always what happens right before the ending, but it can never stick the landing. And while the Dagon arc is no different, I feel like it's this way for a completely different reason. Now, this isn't based on any existing theories or evidence, this is 100% speculation, so in the spirit of the Dagon arc, join me in the donning of the tinfoil hat. I think that developing Omniverse is what ruined the Dagon arc. Hear me out. Omniverse was practically a brand new show, despite being a continuation of the first 3 series. So unlike going from AF to UA, where you expand on what's there, OV was reworking Ben 10 from the ground up. Aside from new stories, it had new characters, a new art style, a new method of marketing, and it even serves as an entry point for fans who may not have seen the first 3 series. And it goes without saying that developing a new show is a lot of work. So much work that the attention they had to give it, I can't help but feel is what made the final few episodes of UA suffer. The Greg and Kevin stories ended pretty abruptly, sure, but they were jam-packed with story and content, and felt like a whole adventure, where the Dagon arc towards the end felt very unfocused, especially with today's episode. It seems like the crew knew that they would end the series on a 3-part finale, and just banked on figuring it out when they got there, but because they were so distracted during the process, once they actually got there, they were more underprepared than they realized, and just had to throw in anything they could think of just to fill up time. It's kind of hard to explain without going through these episodes beat by beat, so perhaps I'm not convincing you as much in this intro thesis, but luckily that's what these full-length breakdowns are for. But when watching these final few episodes, I can't help but feel a lack of passion. There's so much aimless, dry action, almost no characterization until the final couple moments, and with 3 whole episodes, there's not really anything to show for it. And as Omniverse premiered only a few months after Ultimate Alien ended, it's clear that these 2 shows were in production at the same time, and I think most of their dedication went towards developing Omniverse. Now you might be thinking, why didn't this happen when the classic switched to Alien Force? Well, they were mostly 2 different crews. The work was divided among 2 different teams, but here, the UAF crew is more or less the same people as the Omniverse crew. Instead of 2 groups developing 2 shows, it's 1 group developing 2 shows. And they had to juggle wrapping up their previous series while also introducing a new show that's different from the last show in almost every single way. There's no way they could have given Ultimate Alien their full attention, especially since the loss of their main showrunner, Dwayne McDuffie. Now, am I faulting Omniverse for this? Not really. They were met with an impossible task, and while UA may have suffered, Omniverse flourished with incredible visuals, setting up a new storyline that flashes between the past and present, and loads of new characters. It's almost enough to say it was worth letting UA drop the ball just because of what we got out of OV, but it just hurts to see the UAF era, arguably the most iconic version of the series. The first thing that comes to mind when the majority of people think of Ben 10 is the trio, and just watch it fizzle out in a story void of passion and direction and a satisfactory conclusion. Well, I mean, I still like how Ultimate Alien ends, but it's far from the capability and the talent that the crew working on it had. So let's take a look at the episode that starts the mishandling of the Dagon War. But if this is your first breakdown and you're curious about how my rating system works, there's a detailed description down below along with a link to all my previous breakdowns, but by all means, watch this one first. I'm sure you'll still enjoy it. The 6-year anniversary of 5YL is this Monday, April 3rd. I'm going to be streaming on our second channel, The Rust Bucket. It's going to be a casual one. We're just going to be hanging out, drawing some doodles, looking at the comics. So please stop by. It would be great to have a chat with y'all, answer some questions, and just be involved with the community. I'll post an event link down below, but without further ado, let's get into the breakdown. On March 17th, 2012, Charlotte Fullerton gave us the beginning of the end. After waiting for George to make his move, the trio finally engage with the Esoterica versus Forever Night war. They fight their way to the seal, only to come across Vilgax once again, who is now infused with the power of the Dagon. You know, this might be the last time we ever see Kevin's garage. It's not really a staple of the show, like Mr. Smoothie or the Plumber HQ, but it's in a surprising amount of episodes. In fact, way more than I realized before I started doing these breakdowns. So in a way, it is kind of a loss. This was one of their only home bases.
You told us 10 minutes over an hour ago.
This far in the show, and we still see Kevin working on his car too. It's probably always swapping functions in and out.
It's not like you even need to turn your car into a submarine.
That was mentioned before.
Is there anything this car can't do?
It's not submersible, but I'm working on it. I'm putting an electrolysis unit on the car. It makes oxygen from water. I'm trying to make the car submersible.
But with 2 nods towards it and no payoff, that's also kind of a loss. And with him being downgraded to a reoccurring character in Omniverse, it's not really a spot to pull it off anymore either.
It's only a matter of time before some bad guy knocks us into the water. Someday all this work is gonna save our lives.
If they were to pay off Kevin's car turning into a submarine, what would be your pitch for that adventure? Leave a comment down below. I might pick out a few favorites to shout out next breakdown. Also, this is a very daring angle to draw someone at. No matter how precise or exact you'd get it, it's always gonna look a little funky.
Hurry it up so we can do something fun.
Oh, this whole shot too. The way Kevin gets up and Gwen pivots around him. It's a really exaggerated shot for quite a normal conversation.
Driving a car underwater is fun.
He's right, that would be nuts. Finally, the Esoterica are back. I've been enjoying a handful of the episodes in between the trio waiting for Sir George to shoot his shot, but still, at this point in the show, these are the guys I'm here for. You can see a slightly altered version of their effects. Their dimensional slice has a feather to it, rather than being a sharp cutoff. I wonder if it's like this forever, or just an every now and then sort of thing. Wow, this is a lot of them. How many we got here? Like 13 or so? They're also continuing the feather on the slice. We get another instance where Ben just raises the Ultimatrix and it activates. I saw a comment the other day that intrigued me, suggesting that similar to smartwatch technology, where the Ultimatrix knows to activate just by Ben raising and looking at it, which I'd like that explanation, but I feel like that would also lead to it accidentally activating all the time. But at least we got the hologram facing the right way. Very lengthy transformation. We get the entire basic filler transformation that's been used as a placeholder since the pilot of Alien Force. And then we get into Forearms' unique transformation. The entire sequence lasts 20 seconds. That's pretty lengthy for a transformation in this show. It's also animated differently from the other UAF Forearms one we've seen. It's a lot more floaty, with limbs just drifting out of each other and evenly adjusting to the position they need to be in. Like this, see how it just kind of grows and flows into each other. Whereas beforehand, the ones we got in video games, everything had a pop and a snap to it. So you even see some stringy residue. See how the arms open and pop, and then the torso extends with a pop. There's like a resistance to the hand that snaps open. Yeah, a lot more rigid and beat for beat points compared to this one, which happens a lot smoother and more fluid. I kind of like the rigid one a little more. I don't really mind this, I'm just not sure about the reason for it needing to be reanimated. I'm in favor of whenever they throw the orbs as their way of attack rather than shooting a beam. Helps diversify the endless beam characters in Ben 10. Yeah, so far they're really maintaining the feather. This guy here is the second instance I've seen where an Esoterica member doesn't phase through dimensions through a straight flat line. I believe the first one I've seen was in A Night to Remember, which makes the method of their transportation all the more confusing. Grabs both of them by the leg and claps them together. Smacks them into the ground. Not many defenses against 2 ninjas doing flying kicks at you. Forearms got that covered.
Try to capture one of them to ask him questions.
Got one right here.
This is one of the rare times where Kevin absorbs something and his eyes remain white. Usually they also turn the same color as the metal. None of them are really strong enough to overpower him, but unlike typical goons, they're all attacking at multiple times, which is able to overwhelm Forearms and start making things difficult. See, look at these 2 guys fire off their energy as the others recover. I believe I've said this before too, but the Esoterica are very well coordinated. And they're smart enough to escape when necessary so they won't get captured. This guy would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for Gwen's abilities.
He can't teleport through mana.
You don't scare me. I've got nothing to say.
So by his consciousness and dialogue, this is one of the guys who chose to join the Flamekeeper Circle on his own whim, unlike Winston, who was possessed by the Dagon to join the Esoterica. Funny enough though, this guy is voiced by the same guy who does Winston, so... This whole time you could still hear Gwen's mana humming to maintain the hold on this guy. Excellent detail.
You know what this is?
Pretty smart move for Kevin to use this thing to intimidate the guy. Does look pretty freaky if you don't know what it is. Forearms' uniform is miscolored as his skin right here. Curious how this thing is supposed to work for his car, though. Is it pumping in air or something? But again, if you didn't know what this is pretty freaky. This big claw thing just attaches to your chest and starts breathing on you.
The time is at hand. We were sent to destroy any who dare interfere with the coming of Dagon.
It's just like what they said about being the welcoming committee.
Dagon promised to return to Earth someday.
And the Flamekeepers Circle are the welcoming committee.
Except a lot less peaceful than you might expect when hearing that. This is the tallest I've seen forearms in UAF, I think. Ben's head only comes up to forearms' torso. Literally twice the size.
I thought you were gonna give George a chance.
It's been 2 weeks.
Now, as much as I felt like the in-between episodes broke up the pacing of the Dagon arc a bit too much, I like that they at least acknowledged that it happened. Like back during the Map of Infinity arc, the trio learn of the Map of Infinity, and then the very next episode is the Cash and JT Webb show.
If Agrigor can reassemble the map, he can travel to the Forge of Creation and gain the greatest power in the universe.
A live webcast. JT and Cash in action.
And with something like the threat of Ultimate Greg going to the Forge of Creation, obtaining this mysterious new power, you'd think they'd drop everything and be on that with every waking moment. It seemed a bit weird for them to just randomly start chilling and going back to their day-to-day lives when they still have map pieces to look for. Whereas here, they were waiting to make their move on purpose because of Ben giving his word to George to stepping back and letting them try it their way.
What do you want?
To be left alone so that I can destroy my ancient enemy.
My friends and I'll back off, but when you fail, the sword is mine.
So all of those filler episodes in between have a purpose now, because in universe, they are trying to kill time. Still a little bit frustrating though. This is the same building that we saw in the Flamekeeper Circle. I think we get to see a little bit more of it now. Could have at least slapped some tarps or a fire logo on this or something. Jazz it up a bit.
Dagon's troops are long gone.
It's another great scene for Clockwork. Also, this kind of jukes you out, making you think he's gonna get a full transformation. Pretty sure this is the only time you see Clockwork's gears actually move. And they're animating them move, 2 of them turning, 1 of them ticking in between the ridges of the gear as they're panning out from him and rotating him. The result, yeah, it's not the smoothest it could probably look with the right amount of time and dedication, but still, that's a very impressive animation to even attempt doing. A lot of different perspectives and literal moving parts you gotta account for. See, Clockwork was cool to me because as much as I love time travel and time powers and all of that, this is one of the most unique ways I've ever seen it being used, with a character that can see through time and holographically project the past. And based on some later feats of Clockwork, I guess you could presume he can do this to see the future too. But I feel like Clockwork should have been used more as like a mystery solving alien, or like when Ben is doing like reconnaissance work or trying to track someone down. Whereas he does a lot of cool stuff in Omniverse. The techno bubble scene is obviously one of his most iconic scenes, and he definitely feels a lot more powerful in Omniverse, but he does kind of transition into yet another offensive attack alien and loses a little bit of his uniqueness. I like when Ben has aliens that are more of an advantage outside of combat, like Chameleon, who we're never gonna see again. I like that other people can see this happening too. When they are holographically projected, you can see Gwen and Kevin through him with a bit of transparency. He's still a pretty heavy solid though. It could be a little bit more transparent, but perhaps they just really wanted you to see him. In fact, were they transparent in the Eggman Cometh? I felt like the projections were solid there. Yeah, they were. Alright, not a big deal though.
We must prepare the way.
Oh, snap. You see him become completely solid and even get a sound effect cue when Ben plays the footage forward.
We must prepare the way. We must destroy the seal.
That's pretty cool. And you can even pause it. I forgot that he can scrub through it like a VCR.
The seal's that big stone disc.
It's the only thing keeping Dagon from moving from his dimension into ours.
Still not totally sure how that works though, because we did see another side of that seal, and like it made it seem like Dagon was trapped behind there somehow. Lacubra's at least physically trapped on Earth. We did see the POV of one escaping. So now I'm thinking that George physically locked all the Lacubras in that little stone cave, and Dagon was magically locked using that stone. So it was a 2-for-1. That's what I'm getting from this. And back to Area 51 with the Forever Knights. It's all coming together. Like you can see George's little stage right here in this wide shot. The crowd is super empty though, until we get right here up close. I feel like you could have gotten away with drawing some black squiggles there.
Our time has come. All the other false purposes of the Forever Knights.
So George is still aiming to collectively put the Knights behind one goal.
Gathering technology.
Which was their first primary goal in Classic.
Fighting dragons.
A nod to the dropped Alien Force plotline.
Nonsense and corruption of our one true mission.
Did he even care about the Purge? Because when Driscoll failed the Purge, George really didn't care. And in fact, he himself has never really shown any major alien prejudice. Like nothing more where it seems like he targets them specifically and like has a passionate despise of them. So that was probably a false motive of the Knights too. So what was the purpose of the Purge then? Just like a distraction or something? A way for the Knights to test out their weaponry?
Together we shall slay the dragon. I swear!
Took him a second to start cheering.
I swear!
They're like, oh shit, should we clap? They're all probably just tired of changing motives, and they're like, all right, yeah, let's go fight. And they animated the crowd waving their swords. Granted, it's just one guy, copy and pasted hundreds of times, but still, a lot of the times they never even animate the crowds.
Here's the plan. We're in, we're out.
It's simple.
Simple to the point of not actually being a plan.
I was just gonna say that too. Gwen's always saying the shit I'm thinking. I'm really gonna miss the trio's dynamic too. I'm trying to soak it in while I can, because this is the last time we're ever really gonna see them together in this manner. Lots of different things going on here. We got a lot of archers on top, on reserves, probably sniping down at the crowd. A trail of knights forcing their way through the crowd as others stay back and keep the terrain thick. Right up here, this is where everyone's starting to collide. Lasers and explosions galore. And a stone. Man, they're using such a high-tech machine. There's even a control panel on it just to launch a stone into the air. This should have been some type of like technological bomb, or at least make it an energy ball. I'd even settle for that. This is just very weird looking. Are they even aiming with this thing or just launching it? But luckily the stone didn't hit any Forever Knights, just the Esoterica. And there's crowds of CG Esoterica and Forever Knights, which honestly don't look that bad. The frame rate as usual is the giveaway, but as for coloring, shading, and blending, they look pretty solid. Like see in this still frame, it looks alright. Maybe once you start noticing some of the repeated animations, it gives it away a little bit more. But honestly, they're pretty smart with their use of them. And to achieve shots like this, it's pretty necessary for them to be CG as well. I actually really like how hard they're trying to go with this war. After a while, you do really start seeing some repeated animations though. Like these two guys right here are perfectly in sync with each other. It's like when you're playing an MMO and everyone starts their emote at the same time. I love this guy right here. Phases straight through the sky and kicks at the camera. And just sitting here looking at all of the looped animations. The hard part is because they gotta keep it minimal enough where they can just sprinkle these around. The Esoterica can't really do anything crazy, like all their different maneuvers and flips. And likewise, the Knights can't be using all their different weaponry. Kind of just a bunch of 1v1s patterned over each other and starting at different times. But again, like, what are you really gonna do here? I'm happy they're at least paying off with a war instead of just hyping up a possible war that's not gonna happen. And there are some diverse ones every now and then. This knight right here is pinning down an Esoterica and just beating him in the face over and over again. Esotericas actually move a lot more rigid and hold key poses a lot longer. And this was another smart thing too, to animate a lot of 2D ones in the foreground with all of their diverse abilities. The Esoterica can shoot out their energy beams, and this guy's over here with a crossbow, so that when you layer them over the CG renders, it does look a lot more diverse. Although now that I'm looking at it, I think there is some repeated 2D animations too. Like look at this knight right here, jumps up forward with a kick, boom, kicks him across and lands. Then we pan over. This knight right here literally pops out of nowhere into frame from thin air, runs up, and it's the same animation but mirrored. It is covered up by all the chaos though. Like this guy running across the camera, super in the foreground, saves it. Can you tell he pops into frame in motion though? Not really, like there's way too much shit going on. But yeah, this guy, maybe he was an Esoterica in disguise or something. In fact, we can even see a CG and a 2D one side by side. And yeah, some angles really aren't flattering for the CG models. But see right here, aside from the highlight, they look pretty indistinguishable. They don't have the Forever Knights logo though. Come on guys, what happened to attacking multiple at a time? You can hear some groans and stuff planted in there so that you don't assume these guys are dead. Speaking of, I was debating what a good time to bring this up was, but I guess now's a better time than any. Derek said that the ending of UA ended with somebody dying and they had to change that or something like that, but he wasn't like super involved with the process or paying attention, so he doesn't know exactly what happened, but this episode had to be re-edited. But people do die in this episode, like on screen. I don't know if he was referring to like all the groans that are placed in with all the random guys on the floor, or maybe like the scenes where people do die, maybe they cut out some of the impacts and make it less violent. But I know Conduit, Edwards, Winston, and even Old George all die by the end of this, so if the network was fine with that, I don't get why they had to re-edit the episode for either someone else's death or making their own deaths less gruesome. But now with that out of the way, we'll see if we can figure it out.
Forward to the cavern of the seal.
This is the third time George has gone to the seal. First when he sensed it was damaged in the creature from beyond, and then when following Vilgax with the attempt to slay the Dagon right there. So now here's attempt number 3.
I'll protect you, sir.
How come Squire didn't get upgraded armor? I get maybe it's for like us, so he's more recognizable as a character, but he really shouldn't be out here, especially as part of the leading squad heading towards the seal without all of this high-tech armor. See, especially like with this, I don't get it. Is it like a noble thing or something? Like he wants to be able to do it through the purest methods of the Forever Knights. I don't know, they don't acknowledge it, so it's just a bit weird.
Looks like we're late for the war. I have to admit, I didn't see it coming.
That's because you were off playing with dino chickens and fighting a sea dragon.
But several hundred Forever Knights on our side definitely improves our odds.
Which should be a valid point. They've already worked with the Forever Knights before, and then it appeared that George and Ben formed a truce. I think later on the Knights turn against the trio anyways, or at least like they don't honor the truce. But yeah, the Knights should be on the trio's side right now.
Take us down into the middle of the fight. Trust me.
I don't know, man. You should go straight towards the cave. You're just making it harder for yourself. I either never noticed this before or I noticed and forgot, but when the rust bucket lands, its wheels unfold sideways and then rotate into position.
We're here to help George.
It's Ben 10. Destroy him.
Oh, so I guess it happens immediately. Did George not clue them in? It looks like it's all the Knights gearing up for the fight too. The Esoterica don't really care, or they're smart enough to let the Knights try fighting first. Oh yeah, they're all CG now. With here, it's not just the frame rate, like how incredibly smooth it is, but they're also very tiny compared to Ben. Even right here, where one of the Knights runs underneath the layer of the Rust Bucket's wheel, although I will give them credit, the shadow of the Rust Bucket does pass over them, and they get darker when they're underneath it. Wow, pretty cool one take. Man, Kevin roundhoused this guy in human form.
I had a feeling this would happen.
When?
Right when you said, trust me.
Why is Ben upset about this? It was a bad plan. Kevin's even calling him out on it. That looked a little flimsy. Like Kevin's out here flying around with a double spin kick. Let's see, this is another animation that looks a bit too slow to maybe sell the intensity that they were aiming for. But I like that you do see Ben dodging stuff in the background. There's overlap for all of the action beats. What? Human form Ben smacks some advanced alien Forever Knight armor, and it works. Also, again, sorry about the pixeliness sometimes. That also just happens. I can't fix that. And like, granted, he does wind up for it. We have seen Ben do some pretty impressive things, but I mean... I'll never get used to seeing him be so superhuman. Especially look how thick these helmets are. Somehow that's less believable than Clockwork rewinding time.
This could get messy.
There he goes, just raising the Ultimatrix again. And we get our third transformation sequence. Technically 4, because Forearms had like 2 slapped together, his original and the filler one. And Clockwork got one, and now Goop. Seems like they're filling up a little too much time here. Maybe it was a schedule thing, a budget thing, miscommunication, no matter what. I'm getting the feeling that with this whole 3-part ending, it was really hard to block out where scenes would land, and they're just adding in a ton of transformation sequences now to fill up time, because the pacing wasn't as fine-tuned as they may have hoped. Also, just kind of want to take this UFO and drag it over just a teeny bit so it floats above him correctly. In fact, can I? If I take this part, move it over here.
It's the voice, isn't it?
There we go. Even blends in. Another small nitpick is the UFO being pointing up the entire time instead of like nosediving the direction that it needs to move the goop around. If that makes sense, like I feel like this top orb should be leading the motion of the UFO like this and like be dragging it around and stuff. They wrecking the ship.
Did anyone remember to close the door?
That's true, they just keep coming out through the hull. Thought it was these guys that had the more bluish colored armor, but this is probably a good place where that drop shadow effect would be used for his metal encasings, or even just an outline, because it's kind of hard to see the difference of them. Even the next shot has outlines to differentiate them.
Oh yeah.
I'm also talking about the art a lot because there isn't really much going on in the episode itself, right? Like, I'm gonna try to save this discussion for the ratings, but I feel like there's a bit too much action going on, or at least too much like fluff action. Like, we're not here to see the trio fight the knights for the billionth time. We're here to see the catalyst of Old George and Dagon and Vilgax and all of that. So we're about halfway through the episode now, and the knights are fighting the trio for literally no reason.
We're here to help.
This has been going on for like 3 minutes now. Combined with all the transformation sequences, this is kind of just like a non-episode so far. Nothing's really getting accomplished. Again, it's probably just like scheduling and planning. You know, Omniverse was also in development during this time too. The finale of Ultimate Alien and the start of Omniverse were in production at the same time. It had to be that way with how close they were coming out. So it feels like the Ultimate Alien finale really got the shaft, because like nothing's happening right now. It all feels like everything that's happening is just to try to keep things going until they reach like the plot points they want to and the story beats they have planned. But as for like the in-between actions, which I feel like is starting to take way too long, I'm just not feeling it. Oh, we're back to the moving camera. This is a pretty decent use of it. Goop's animation does look great though. This is a hard thing to get right. But likewise, I'm also not a fan of seeing the Ultimatrix get sliced up like this. I can make a whole thing out of this, but I'm not feeling it right now. Simply put, this is whack. What's Goop even doing right here? He's like supercharging an attack or something. Just bloobity bloobity blop. Stretches out his tentacles and grabs a hold of these guys.
That's the last of them. And you didn't trust the plan.
Yeah, sure, Ben. This was all on purpose. All they've done so far is fly down into battle and make the Esoterica's job easier by taking care of some of the knights. So far, they've literally made things worse. I feel like conceptually a lot of this action for Old George ain't bad. Like, this is pretty good. But this episode is just full of characters taking on grunts. Like, even the Esoterica, who I've been hyping up pretty hard throughout the breakdowns lately, are getting boring to see. Like, I guess if this action meant something more, but we've been having almost 12 minutes of straight action, and it just kind of feels like we're waiting for something to happen, and we're just trying to get there. It hasn't happened yet. Not even because I've seen this before or anyone's seen this before. It's like, even if it's your first time watching, it's like, what's really happening right now? But I do like George reinforcing the sturdiness of his sword with his hand to block. That's a pretty cool move.
I'm here, Sir George, I'm here.
Little late, boy.
No one falls this day, George.
It's Eddie.
One but you.
Sir!
You should have been wearing the armor, man. Took that head on. See, now we're seeing the head of the knights face off against the head of the Esoterica. I feel like this should have been more exciting, but I do chalk this up to us just really not getting much out of Edwards here. We've gotten plenty for George, and I feel like that makes him a pretty notable character, maybe even on the level of a fan favorite, if I were to be so bold. But Edwards, man, I mean, he's just a grunt with a name. See right here, Edwards got stabbed and he dies. So I don't know if this was the re-edited scene or not. Maybe it happened more gruesome. Like, you see this lightning and it flashes right as George stabs him. So it could be a way to censor it, I guess. Like that misty fog in Washington, D.C., where it covers up how grotesque and detailed the T-Rex reforming its flesh is. So that could have been it, but I mean, they didn't take the death out. He still dies. You don't see any wounds on the back of him, though. The robe isn't even ripped. But maybe he was just stabbed like halfway through. Did all that ground cave up when he got shot? Nope, doesn't look like it. Ground's pretty normal. Now it's all messed up.
Saved my life.
Did he really, though? Do you think if Edwards got that hit in, then George would have died?
Sir!
He could just be trying to make Winston feel better, but I think George would have survived.
Honor to be your squire.
He's at peace with it.
You died a knight, a forever knight.
I like the moment. I wouldn't say I care too much about Winston's death. I'm also a pretty big advocate where, like, not every single death needs to be so emotionally taxing for the audience. Like, George feels something about this, and I feel like that's what's important. And it also plays into the stakes of this battle. Like, 2 people just died right now, 2 pretty notable named characters. And not just died, but, like, murdered too. So I feel like the advantages for stuff like this is more of the themes, setting the tone, and showing the stakes, rather than being like, oh, the audience is gonna go nuts over the death of Winston. So I still respect scenes like this. I like how it plays into the narrative, but there's no real emotional ties to either of these characters. But again, Winston right here dies on screen too. So what was Derek talking about? Unfortunately, we'll probably never get an answer, even if we were lucky enough to still have him around today. Derek didn't even know the details himself, so I don't know. Anyone's guess is as good as mine.
Show yourself, Dagon!
You are nothing.
Face me!
This is the darkest this cave has ever been. All the other times it was like decently lit.
If battle you seek, face the herald of my arrival.
Oh, we're about to meet a herald. Also, you can see that the seal is cracked a lot more than last time. Who could it be? Now, I'll admit, this is a twist I didn't see coming when I first saw this, and I wasn't really sure what to make of it. For one, does this mean that Vilgax canonically has toes? We've always only seen him in shoes. I do kind of like this design, though. I mean, we've already seen it with the Lacubra, so it's less of a shock. It's kind of just like an assessment that we recognize the Lacubra patterns on Vilgax, and, you know, we put 2 and 2 together. But, I mean, it works.
I live!
And his glow is nice too.
All hail the grandeur of Dagon!
It did throw me through a loop that Vilgax was like so Dagon worshipy with this though. Until you find out that it's all an act, like that makes up for it, but right now it's like you think Vilgax is serious, and seeing him submit to somebody else's power and being their herald, it's like, who even is this dude anymore?
I have witnessed the power of Dagon and been reborn!
Vilgax gonna be rolling up to people's doors like,
Excuse me, do you have a moment to talk about our Lord and Savior, the Dagon?
passing out the Flamekeeper Circle pamphlets and shit.
I worship Dagon, as all who live shall do.
Yeah, he's really trying to sell it right now. Maybe as a hint to the audience that you should be doubtful, but I mean, UAF Vilgax has been so wacky. You could believe that that the writers are serious about this, like they do want Vilgax to be a Dagon worshiper. And I feel like that's what makes it, even though it's an act, still off-putting and unappealing. Like most twists when they're revealed, you feel like you've been enlightened. You're like, oh, so that's what's happening. But here it's like, I don't know, you buy it a little bit too much that it just makes you kind of hate Vilgax even more. You're like, oh, all right, of course that's what they're doing with him now. Like, why not? They turned him into a giant squid last season.
Have at me!
Save your strength for the dragons.
No, don't interrupt this. I want to see this. This is the kind of action I'm looking for. Oh, snap. I forgot about Vilgax's purple lightning, though. The nerve system got some competition. While they're completely unfazed by this extra-dimensional lightning attack of a Dagon-infused Vilgax, yet Ben Tennyson can punch one of these guys in the head and they'll react. Ooh, his eyes turn white. Never noticed that before. But this is like that light attack that George did, where he just made the sword glow and all of a sudden, you know, the trio was like freaking out about it. What are these light attacks supposed to be doing?
Almighty Dagon might show you mercy.
Actually is kind of true though. Dagon did end up returning the souls to Ledger Domain when the bargain was refused, so it shows he has at least a semblance of order, structure, and respect. So did this guy die? I'm just gonna be asking myself that for like the rest of the series. Again, they're completely unaffected. It's like happening to the terrain around them, but like they're totally unfazed. It's got a big old bubble orb here. See all those random groans added? Stuff like that always stands out to me. They're just like, no, these guys are all right. Don't worry, you can hear them. Oh my god, we're still here. I totally forgot about this.
How do we get inside the cave?
Well, maybe if you landed next to the cave instead of saying...
Take us down into the middle of the fight.
Like, for real, dude. What? Oh, this Esoterica was like halfway there. He was so fidgety, and then boom. Look at them all doing their poses and stuff too, like it's an anime opening.
Esoterica, inside the rust bucket.
Now that they've defeated all the knights, the Esoterica are moving in to attack. Yeah, see, they were waiting, so that was pretty smart.
They're straddling dimensions, hiding.
I don't see anything.
Quick note, I remember in a previous breakdown, I was trying to collect all of the different powers that the Esoterica had. And straddling dimensions counts, but I can't find the original graphic to add on to it. Been trying to delete a lot to save space on my PC lately. But yeah, dimensional straddling, another Esoterica power.
We need you to keep blocking the door. Unless you want more Forever Knights in here.
They can't shut the door? Y'all two are just standing around watching her do this. Like, you... just shut the door. Now shut the door and fly off.
That's better.
Or not.
The Esoterica are coming after us.
Similar move that she did in A Night to Remember.
They're climbing around on stairs in a parallel dimension.
But last time you were able to see them in Dagon's dimension. But here, she said they were straddling dimensions or something. So they're like on Earth, but invisible. So they're probably not always running through dimensions. Sometimes they're there, but unseen.
Point out where they are. Kevin and I can hit them.
Transformation sequence number 4. What? Of all the times they splice in Fast Track's name.
Fast track! Fast track! Fast track! Fast track! Fast track!
They didn't do it here. He even poses like he's supposed to. Hold on, I'm sorry. Let me just do something here real quick. If I just get in there. This ain't gonna look the best, but it's something. I'm just gonna wing it when it comes to the tongue color. There, that looks pretty good. Now let's do an in-between. Now let's do one with like F, like F, because he says fast track. Now let's see. Right there, that's where I want it. Now, luckily for me, the series already reused the same fast track sound over and over again, so it would actually be very much in the tune of the show to reuse one. And I already compiled a compilation of them for the last breakdown, so we gotta find one that doesn't use a lot of music. That one comes off of the flash too much. Same issue. That might be it. Okay, let's see. He talks longer than I have time. Maybe I can extend it. Maybe I can get away with it if I like just found the right medium. Like a band-aid. Alright, as long as the music's good. It works. Now we add the frames. There's that F1. Alright, let's give it a shot. In retrospect, since I didn't have the footage in original quality, plus my line work was thicker than I realized when I was doing it, I probably could have made it a little bit better, but it was still fun, so thanks for letting me waste your time.
Over!
Oh, we have another instance of them coming in at a non-parallel angle. Look at him push his head through. In fact, it looks like 2 layers accidentally got added here. See how he splits into 2 for a frame, and then turns back into 1 guy.
Over there!
Like the after images you see of Fast Track. I don't think they do that every time, but I like whenever they do.
Your left! Your other left!
I swear, your other left is one of the first tropes I ever noticed as a kid. Characters will always go left, your other left. But also this kind of reminds me of her doing the same thing with Kevin fighting Bradley in Prisoner 775.
I can sense his mana. He's back to your left! No, behind you!
Except Fast Track's actually able to keep up with Gwen's commands.
It'll take forever to fight our way past all those guys.
This is taking too long.
I don't think the Ultimatrix is dead right now. Jet Ray would come in handy for him to fly them across, right? Or even Gwen, bare minimum, like doing the platforms or bringing them along in a sphere. They're just running through this place on foot.
Get in! I'm thinking cannonball. Maybe.
He says maybe because he doesn't even know if he'll get cannonballed. Heat Blast! Another no-name shout. Except he's facing the other way, so I could probably get away with this one pretty easily. What's he talking? Ultimate Sacrifice or something? Heat Blast! There we go. Heat Blast! We're also seeing Heat Blast fly for the first time in UAF without the rock.
I should have teleported him.
Yeah, maybe. Or a bunch of other stuff too.
Can keep a bad man down.
Heat Blast versus Vilgax pays homage to the first time they saw each other.
It's only right that you should be here at my moment of ultimate triumph.
Vilgax is like, oh good, you're here, watch this. He doesn't even try to fight Ben. Oh, also our second time seeing Heat Blast fly around. Fire looks really good.
He and his master must be destroyed.
Man, I'm not gonna lie, I really like UAF Heat Blast's look. In fact, dare I say it, it might even be my favorite Heat Blast look. I'm very attached to the textures that Classic did, but I just love the sharp black rock shading. Well, Omniverse does it too. I'm not a big fan of the proportions they gave him. Wow, Vilgax really must have booked it. Look at all these dudes just suffering in pain, and they're still just casually strolling through the cave. Vilgax's shadows acting as a light source. That's something.
Have at me!
The battle is already over.
Is Vilgax doing this? I'm assuming Vilgax is doing this, but he's not even touching or facing the seal. He's breaking through the Dagon's dimension, but somehow Dagon's still not free. I'll never get how that works. I do like the two separate sets of shadows, a good detail. All right, we're here in Dagon's dimension. Man, I hate to say it, but I don't have a lot of great things to say about this episode, especially because I've been so like hellbent on trying to really shine some good light on the Dagon arc. There's a lot of great things about it, and it's actually, I hold that arc a lot higher than some of the other arcs, I'll say that. Like, it's not my absolute least favorite. But man, this was a rough episode. I'm just gonna say it, the plot's a 1. It's not build up because it all assesses everything we already know. It's only really saying like, this is happening now. I mean, we get Dagon Vilgax and all, but like, at this point, everything is just so fluctuatingly random. It's less cool and more underwhelming. There's so much action, but not in a good way. And I got nothing. Like, what am I supposed to say here? I don't think it's horrible or damaging to Ben's image. Like, I wouldn't say, I don't know, I've been picking on the Mauve Riedel episode a lot, but that's just because I just reviewed it. Like, that one, like, I feel like that actually paints Ben 10 in a bad light. This one just, it's boring. I guess it was cool to see the war come together and all the plot lines overlap. I mean, you can accomplish that in the first couple minutes, which they did, and everything else is just them fighting their way through endless crowds because they didn't park correctly. In characterization, like, everyone's got like those cardboard personality feels. Like if they were like one of those, like a pull my string and hear 1 of 10 pre-recorded lines or something. Like, it's so phoned in. Like, these characters don't feel three-dimensional in this episode. Visuals, I wanted to get, like, there's a lot they were trying to do. I don't want to undersell the amount of work it must have been to pull off those crowd shots. It's a lot of planning, a lot of animation. They had to build those models. They had to lay everything out correctly. When they were at least 2D, they got to use more of their diverse weaponry, the knights I mean. And the esoterica, it's at a point where they can't switch things up as much anymore. So now that we're over how cool they are, now that we're over getting used to their abilities, now the way to take them to the next level is use these battle scenes to tell a story or send a message or something. Or if anything, if it's gonna be mindless action, at least make it cool and interesting. Like, I'm totally fine with mindless, nonsensical, plot halting action if it's worthy. And I didn't get that from this either. Importance, I feel like it's a 5, but it's a guilty 5 because like you do need this. This is part of the 3-part finale. And I was thinking to myself, like, what if you just watched the last 2 parts and like you skipped this intro? Could you still get away with it? Maybe. I mean, for what it is, the micro pieces there, it does help the payoff feel stronger, but there's just so much fluff. If this wasn't the finale, I would probably say, yeah, go ahead and skip it. But I mean, this is what everything is leading to. And it was the introduction of the war coming to pass, of Dagon Vilgax, the dimensional barrier breaking down. So I guess, yeah, there's just, I wish it wasn't important, I guess, so you didn't have to watch it, because the entertaining's a 2. Like, the war is neat, Clockwork is cool, Dagon Gax, like, is conceptually cool. So with all this criticism, it's definitely buffed up by the importance. I started out wanting to rank this higher, and now I'm ending it feeling like I ranked it too high. But I mean, the characters, they're like, you know, believable. They still feel like the trio. They just feel very phoned in, is the phrase of the season, I guess. And there is effort with the visuals. Let's move on to the final thoughts. So since George and Ben are basically on good terms, wouldn't it have been cooler if they got to fight alongside the knights? It's just like Ben said, he expected the knights to be on their side, and I feel like that would have made a more interesting story. The knights see themselves as being the heroes, and the trio are there to defeat the knights' greatest enemy, the esoterica. So I would have liked to see some unity there, but perhaps they just needed the extra fight scenes to fill up time. But also begs the question, did Ben even honor the truce? Ben said he was gonna let George try his way first, first, but it seemed like he just got tired of waiting. Because when he gets there, George is just now making his way up to the seal. He didn't actually get a chance to try yet. So Ben kinda went back on his word, if you think about it. But then again, they were attacked by the Esoterica, so perhaps he felt like whatever George was doing the past 2 weeks, it wasn't enough. Anyways, let's take a look at the last week's poll. Of course, Inspector 13 won the poll as the most favored episode out of the bunch. But I think it's neat that every episode at least got some votes. I think it's really interesting that no matter how sure you feel like you can be about the fan base, some people really might just have entirely different tastes from you. 3% of people voted for the Eggman Cometh over Inspector 13, and even though it's not that much, it's still something, and I think that's very notable. But for this week's poll, I want to see what you guys have to say about my conspiracy theory. Do you think developing Omniverse is what made Ultimate Alien suffer, or would this finale not have been great no matter what happened? Let me know what you think in the community tab when this video goes live. I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your weekend, and as always, keep it fizzy.